Let's talk about Elon Musk being the head of Donald Trump's new Department of Government Efficiency. So he's going to try and find savings and essentially more money, or more of Americans' own money. Let's bring in former White House Chief of Staff and now consultant at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, great to see you. Everyone's trying to guess what Elon Musk is going to do. He'll have Vivek Ramaswamy with him as well. On their form, where do you think they're likely to find these efficiencies?
They'll find them everywhere because they are everywhere to be found. There's a discussion now about whether or not we should get rid of our penny or our nickel or our dollar bill. So that's sort of the level of detail where folks are starting, and there's plenty to find. The question is, will they be able to do anything about it? And I think what Vivek and Elon are both starting to discover is they have absolutely zero real authority. They are essentially, Laura, running a very high profile and very powerful public relations campaign, and that's it. And my guess is what they'll try to do is shine some light on some of the bizarre and grotesque wastes of money within the U.S. federal government, and then hope that either the other branches of the executive branch or Congress can do something about it to fix it, because by themselves, Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy have absolutely zero true legal authority.
Yeah, that is certainly going to frustrate one of the most powerful and certainly the richest man in the world in Elon Musk as well. But if you say it's a PR campaign, well, he has a pretty good platform in which to do it.
It is. There's a lot of folks following on X, there's no question. But face it, that if he picks up the phone today and calls over to the Department of Education and actually gets somebody to answer the phone, because there's a chance they probably won't. About 3/4 of U.S. government workers never went back to work after the COVID response.
But they're all still working from home.
They're still working from home. That's exactly right. Wow. So if he gets somebody to pick up the phone, they're going to say, "I'm sorry, you're with what government efficiency?" I don't know what that is, and hang up the phone. So it's going to be I've said before, I'll say again, I think Elon Musk might find it easier to get to Mars than it will be to fix the federal government.
And you've written about that in the Hill today as well, which is really interesting. But look, Donald Trump, even if Elon Musk can't, make these efficiencies, I mean, I think the PR campaign will not be completely useless. And if Donald Trump picks it up, well, then they have an absolute megaphone. But when it comes to real world savings, I mean, Donald Trump's got to be looking at the Ukraine war. And is that why we've heard Zelensky make that concession over the weekend?
I think the reason you heard Zelensky sort of publicly say for the first time that Ukraine was willing to consider the possibility of giving up territory in exchange for future economic and security agreements with the West, I think the reason he said that was because Donald Trump won. You and I have talked about this now for the past year, Laura, that there's very little difference between the policies, that everybody sort of assumed that eventually the way this war would end is that Ukraine would give up some land in exchange for additional considerations from the West. And it looks like that's happening. The biggest difference between Kamala Harris, before her Joe Biden, and Donald Trump was how quickly that was going to happen. And what I think you saw Zelensky sort of acknowledge this week is the reality that Donald Trump won, and he's going to want to try to cease that war, cease hostilities at least, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think so as well. And he's not even inaugurated yet. That doesn't happen until late January. Now that the dust has settled on the election, we're weeks out and the final results are in, it's really interesting to see where those voters settled and what message they'll try to send the Democrats. I mean, still, it's as bad as it looks on election night. Kamala Harris and the Democrats really failed on every metric, didn't they?
They did. Most importantly, they failed on the only metric that really counts, was the Electoral College, but they would go into the details beyond that. But here's what's happening, Laura. It's absolutely fascinating, is that there looks to be the first steps of a major realignment in American politics. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you look at the numbers, the Republicans did much better with the African-American community and with the Hispanic community. The African-American community is typically 95 to 98% voting Democratic. Hispanics not so much, but certainly up in the high 70s. And Trump did better than any Republican in a long time with those groups. At the same time.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think the message was really sort of to folks that were afraid of the government, folks for whom the government has not worked for a long time. I think that worked with the African American community. I think the Hispanic community which is a small c conservative community. They're Democrat, but they're not into trans issues and boys playing on girls' teams and so forth. And I think the culture wars sort of push them to the Republican side as well. They're also more religious typically than the average Caucasian American voter. But that being said, Trump did much worse with well-educated Caucasian citizens, white citizens. And that's a big flip in the past from Republican performances. So what you're seeing is the possibility of a major realignment where the parties are getting ready to change sort of how they identify themselves and who their bases are for future elections.
Oh, it's so fascinating. Can't wait to have a long conversation about that. Great to see you, though. We are out of time today. We'll see you next week.